You ever just sit around a campfire and say to yourself, man, I really miss the Lil Pump and Smoke Perp era of music. Miss when they used to scream, and other complete gibberish on social media and then convert it into unintelligible music. Do you ever think that? No? Me neither. It seemed like back in 2017 though, that is all the general music audience wanted to talk about. Rappers with colorful hair, face tats, and most dominating of all, those who made mumble rap, like my cousins in the 10th grade. Now mumble rap was and is considered in the hip hop community a derogatory term. It on paper is supposed to refer to music that has mumbled lyrics to the point where you can't even really decipher what the artist is actually saying, but if you refer to something as mumble rap unironically nowadays, you're likely to be laughed off the internet. It was considered to be a term coined by Wiz Khalifa back in 2016 when he was discussing the new wave of rappers coming up. Now from his demeanor, I don't think it was meant as an insult, but definitely came across a lot like, yeah, you do your little mumble thing over there while I sit here and make this real music. That Charlie Puth 2 billion streams type music. What do you know about that, huh? What would Wiz Khalifa really do without Paul Walker dying? Let's ask that question. That's so bad. That's so bad. Ever since the term got picked up by everybody and their mother, debate raged on in the music community over this new phenomenon. Was this the next wave of rap music? Was it just a fad that would eventually die out? Was it detrimental to the entire industry? Will the McRib ever make a comeback? These conversations went on for what felt like years, but eventually fizzled out without a real definitive answer. But is that not an answer within and of itself? Did this type of music just fall off the face of the earth like many hip-hop commentators, including my dead grandma, wanted it to?
I've fallen, and I can't get up!
Or did it develop into something more, and create a larger and more lasting impact, whether positive or negative? Where did my beloved mumble rap go? Many consider Future and Young Thug to be the founding fathers of this type of music, and Future would know a thing or two about being a father considering he has 8 kids. How do you have that many kids? What are you doing?
Sensational.
I remember when Lifestyle dropped and half of my timeline was comments like, what the fuck is this? What is this guy even saying? Mainly in reference to Thug's verses. Now you could definitely have an argument that an element of both racism and a lack of understanding of certain accents plays a role into the perception of this song and honestly the entire concept of mumble rap, but that is a conversation for big boys to have. I'm just some idiot on the internet, so if you were expecting some moral grandstanding, my bad. Watch an Anthony Fantano video instead. At the time when these comments were coming out, I thought they were actually pretty funny, because I genuinely couldn't understand a thing that Thug was saying at all during his verses. When you listen to this part, if you can tell that Thug said this, then you deserve a knighthood or a Pulitzer. Even YouTube captions got this wrong, but that's not really anything new. Anyway, moving on. Now, I fucking love Future, and his legacy within hip-hop is vastly underplayed. I definitely contend he is one of the founders of this type of music. If you've ever heard him talk about the creation of Tony Montana, he literally was on so many drugs that he could not pronounce the name regularly and was forced into a mumbled state throughout the entire song.
I remember being so fucking high on this song. Cause I was in like my mouth I couldn't even open my fucking mouth.
I don't know how you accidentally make a really good song while you're completely incoherent. If someone can bless me with that ability, that would be fantastic. He's one of the few rappers who can literally rhyme the word woo with the word woo again, as he did on Life's Good, and still have that song hit hundreds of millions of streams with fans touting him as one of the greatest rappers of this generation. His understanding of feel for a song is pretty unmatched in the industry. Future and Thug are referenced by a lot of artists who were headlining the mumble rap wave as being key influences behind their style and the inspiration behind their music. The likes of Lil Yachty, 21 Savage, Lil Pump, Playboi Carti, and Lil Uzi Vert. Now, you could argue this wave of music started to take off a lot earlier than 2017, let's say, but typically this is considered the peak of mumble rap, and at least from what I recall, when the conversations really started to get the most heated. So how did mumble rap become so popularized and polarizing? I personally put it down to social media via viral challenges and a little bit of outrage, complemented by the reintegration of mixtapes via streaming. SoundCloud brought a whole new life to the rap genre as a whole, and really kickstarted music streaming within this generation. While first being a platform for artists to release music, primarily mixtapes, without the need for a label or distributor, as well as avoiding the high amounts of issues that come with copyright and clearance of samples, the site created a space where artists could experiment with their sound with full creative freedom, and people latched onto it fairly quickly within the mid-2010s. A lot of the biggest artists of this era originally released all of their music on SoundCloud to first garner a fan base, and then once they started to expand and gain exposure, they then transitioned to more commercial spaces like Spotify and Apple Music. It seemed though like all of music started to convert at once, which likely was part of the reason why this era grew to be so dominant in 2017, much to the eventual detriment of SoundCloud itself, however. Got to the point where being called a SoundCloud rapper is probably a more negative term compared to being called a mumble rapper, because at least mumble rappers had clout and didn't miss the initial wave, and aren't 16 and are rapping about getting out of the ghetto even though they live in $1 million neighborhood. Social media's role in this was slightly different. You had all sorts of people doing Uzi's shoulder roll, the mask off challenge, Millie rocking to Magnolia. Hell, even 21 Savage hung out with Jake Paul and looked like he was having the worst time in his life. But nothing draws more attention than negative publicity. As an example, in 2016, Yachty was once asked an interview question about Tupac and Biggie, and instead of simply just saying that their music was good to appease the hip-hop extremists, he not only said he couldn't name 5 songs from either of them, he then months later went on to say that Biggie was
overrated.
Like, how do you even react to that?
I don't know.
Old people like to hate on kids enough as it is. I remember being in high school, I could barely go into a convenience store without getting yelled at by an adult. When you actually give them ammunition, they will shit on you until the end of your days. Comments like these brought a bigger spotlight on these new rappers like never before, and not because people wanted to check out their music, but so people could hate on them for producing what they believe to be an inferior product. And spite is one hell of a motivator. It didn't help that you also had people like Lil Pump, who were shitposting on Maine almost every other day, which further fueled the idea that this new wave of music was being propped up by absolute morons. But people, mainly suburban kids and teenagers, ate that shit up. So let's actually talk about the music that was coming out from these artists. Some of the biggest products to drop were Uzi's Love Is Rage, self-titled mixtapes by Carti, Lil Pump, and Future, with the biggest tracks being EXO Tour Life, Bank Account, Magnolia, Bad and Bougie, and Mask Off. Now I can summarize most of these projects into some basic parameters, let you argue about how intelligible the lyrics are, but other than that, typically these songs focus on creating atmosphere. Heavy bass and hi-hats are fairly dominant to try and create either minimalist or dreamy soundscapes, and the usage of mumbling in a rhythmic and melodic fashion is used with a particular focus on cadence and voice work to fit the overall background beat. It's all about creating a consistent feel throughout the entire song, and the themes that would back them usually fit within a few categories, either getting money, partying, doing drugs, getting women, or a combination of all of them together. So if you're the type of person to click on a video like this, I can't imagine that you relate too deeply to some of these categories, so what does that say about me? I'm sure a lot of my general comments come across as negative criticism so far, and
let me be clear.
This type of music is extremely valid in my eyes. If you are listening to a song about heartbreak, sometimes it's more effective to hear it through the sounds of an instrumental than to hear it through somebody else's voice, because that way you can shape the song via your own connection to the beat. If you have felt a type of emotion that a song is trying to create, you become more drawn to that song overall. But still, this type of music was different from what was common in the industry at the time, and so older generations despised it for what felt like no reason at all. You'd see Yachty getting screamed at by Joe Budden for enjoying the music he makes and not worrying about the substance as much.
I want you who's well-spoken and articulates himself well.
My nigga. Chill. Yeah, hold up.
Or Uzi getting cussed out by Ebro for not wanting to freestyle in old school beats. I think often what gets lost in translation is that obviously none of these artists chose to become popular. I don't even think Pump was really trying, I think he's just a little bit dumb. Sure, that was ultimately their goal from making music, but people as a consumer decide what is the top shelf item. And they can choose badly sometimes. But in 2017, they were making something that people deeply enjoyed, and you can't really take that away from them. This type of music was not just a one-off. It went on to dominate the Billboard charts for months on end, even years. You had Young Thug being featured on Camila Cabello's Havana, Lil Pump and Kanye dressing up as Roblox characters and doing a song together, 21 Savage and Post Malone's Rockstar, which brought even more attention from a different type of audience and ensured mainstream success for so-called mumble rap. And a lot more annoying opinions flooded in too. Even despite the negativity around them though, the genre only seemed to continue to expand until I realized that years have now passed and I haven't seen the word mumble rap on my timeline once, mainly because it's been replaced by OnlyFans and incels. So what happened to all the artists that made this kind of music? So Lil Xan made Betrayed and then became almost instantly irrelevant. Famous Dex stopped putting out music during his peak and ended up falling down a dark path. Made in Tokyo felt like he only made one song. Rich the Kid is actually still somehow doing albums with Lil Wayne and featuring on Kanye's projects, even though he produces pretty uninteresting music. And as I mentioned at the beginning, Lil Pump and Smoke Perp have all but faded from existence. I mean, Pump still has a social media presence, but is more known for being an idiot on livestream than actually making good music, and his last project went basically triple wood, so there's that too. Those who had been involved in that classic XXL cypher though, the likes of Uzi, 21 Savage, Yachty, amongst some others, still consistently put out chart-topping songs and albums. Uzi, after some label disputes, finally released Eternal Take and The Pink Tape, both selling well respectively, although people have started to say that Uzi needs to push himself more in his newer music. Savage has been one of the hottest artists out out right now, nailing massive features with J. Cole and Drake, even doing a full collaboration album with him. And Yachty, I'll go in more in depth about Yachty in a minute. Future is still one of the biggest stars in the game, and Thug, after a lengthy court proceeding, is probably the artist that people are the most hyped about hearing music from next. A lot of these artists that maintained their success did so via a full-scale conversion of their sound, adding more of a substantive element to their music in order to continue flourishing, where it feels like with those that fell off, did so due to external reasons or because they simply could no longer follow the same trends due to a limited skill set. So does this mean that Mumble died off? I wouldn't say that exactly either. Like, look at Playboi Carti. His music can be pretty unintelligible at times, to the point where I've made some jokes about whether or not he actually knows English or if he only talks in vampiric hieroglyphics. Either way, I would say right now he is the artist to bring on to a song, especially if you're looking to add energy to a track. I would also say that he is currently the most entertaining artist out right now, and probably one of the most streamed in hip-hop within the last few years, with Fiend, Timeless, Popular, Carnival, all doing massive numbers, and the common denominator being Carti's appearance on these tracks. He's still mumbling, but found a way to better balance the melodic bass of these types of songs with changing his style of voice for each track in order to have a greater impact. To me, with mumble rap, it's all a matter of differing perspectives. I think you can make a pretty strong statement that this wave of music peaked and slowly died off, but I wouldn't agree. Those with real ability converted and improved their sound to include elements of their initial mumbling type music into a more substantive experience as time progressed, while others didn't and faded away. Circling back to speak about Yachty, he is probably the perfect case study of the ideal result of being a mumble rapper. He, amongst the other identified mumble rappers, were given heavy criticism for a perceived lack of skill in making music, and Boat took that fairly personally, both in interview appearances and within his music. In 2018 to 2019, he would consistently mention that he wanted to be viewed as more than just a mumble rapper, and that he didn't feel that this mantle suited the type of music he wanted to make. The release of Lil Boat 2 showcased more of a concentrated effort to show off his ability to actually rap, even despite the fact that he was still very much within an era that was focused on mumble. And at the time, it did result in Yachty receiving less streams on this project than he had been accustomed to at this point. He, however, stuck with trying to show more of a substantive and technical nature of his craft as more music got released, getting further and further disappointed when the tag of mumble rapper was associated with him. While he may have hurt his overall mainstream popularity to chase recognition as an artist, he is still a name that is fairly relevant in hip-hop, being featured on, working with, and being arguably the best part of Drake's most recent run of music. And looking at the number of artists that didn't try and work on the skill side of their music in this era, this sacrifice appears to have paid off in terms of the long term. The age-old adage of adapt or die was and is in full swing when it comes to music. You can look at artists across the board, and those who had skills, those who were able to evolve their music to maintain their hunger for success across any era, were always the ones who maintained their relevance in the industry. This isn't something new, just history repeating itself. Mumble rap, if you even want to call it that, got a lot of hate from hip-hop purists and hipsters that tell you that listening to somebody with 80 monthly listeners is the real way to hear good music. Like, dog, you're squatting in my house right now. Please fucking leave. In reality, mumble rap was a slight shift to a more melodic and vibe-based direction, with it now being fully integrated into the music and artists pushing the extent of their creativity and get a lot more of that substantive piece that was previously missing. Now, people tend to say that currently rap and hip-hop is dead. There just isn't any good music coming out of it right now. But as Drake mentioned on livestream, it feels like to me more like an off-season. Good music is still being released all the time. It just maybe isn't gravitating to the mainstream like it used to. With more time in the oven, refinement, and experimentation, I think hip-hop could regroup in a major way over the next few years, with more focus on creating harmony between vibe and narrative, with hopefully a new wave of young artists that I can throw rocks at from my balcony. How dare you try and change music?
Nothing makes me laugh more than the Geico lizard. I like Gandalf, cause he's a chill
Stop.
wizard. Dude, I was gonna drop a fucking bomb.